when you read things like the Lord's close to the brokenhearted, it's like, oh man, that's not just like a saying. That is that's where he met me. The notion that things would just sort of fall into my lap as like a
Mm,
person of faith. I don't know
right.
if you've struggled with this.
Right. Wait, that's what happens, right?
Yeah, I
Everything
think
just kind of just comes your way. You just got,
sure.
you got the God luck,
Yeah.
favor, whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't really
And you don't have to
matter.
do
You
anything.
don't, yeah, it just all works out.
Right. And that's just so not true.
So that didn't, oh, okay. Welcome to the episode 2,
It's
episode
two. Wow.
2 of the Banner Studios podcast.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I forgot that it was 2. I had figured from the time we talked till now, maybe you had squeezed something else in, but I'm honored.
Yep. Second guest,
Let's go.
Sean East is your name.
That's right. I
And
have to be reminded all the time. It's a pretty normal day for me.
And yeah, so thought you would make a good guest considering that you are creative and a believer, and
I
that
hope
this
so.
podcast is about being a believer and being creative and
Yeah.
how those things play into each other. And so yeah, I guess just tell me the story of how you got into the creative world, and maybe a little bit of how
Yeah.
your faith has woven into that.
Yeah, for sure. I think, just sort of as a general introduction, because we may have skipped past some of this from the time we met, but I grew up in Kansas City, so I was always just like a Midwestern boy from Lee Summit, huzzah. Nothing really special. I mean, in fact, honestly, it was kind of a comfortable life. And so I grew up in the church, and I think those concepts like creativity and my faith are so much more interwoven now. There came later like much experience through living life and becoming an adult, and my own man that like, even the faith of somebody who is really passionate, like growing up and being in the church and then being a part of like, high school ministry, doing worship and things like that, that you doesn't really quite have like the profound impact that it could until you add that like experience in.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me things just became profoundly real. And I mean I'm kind of jumping around here, but like kind of my understanding of my purpose and why I and how I'm made and like what I'm really put here to do, and sort of just like how that manifests really came later in life. I mean, I'm 32 now, so
Mm-hmm.
I think for me this was like that started when I was honestly like 29, but I had spent an entire life of like kind of dreaming and hoping that, honestly, just kind of suffering from like the um what's the word that I want to use? Just like from the notion that things would just sort of fall into my lap as like a person of faith. I don't know
Right.
if you've struggled with this.
Right. Wait, that's what that's what happens, right?
Yeah, I
Everything
think
just kind of just comes your way. You just got,
sure.
you got the God luck,
Yeah.
favor, whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't really
And you don't have to
matter.
do anything.
You don't, yeah, it just all works out.
Right. And that's just so not true.
So that didn't, oh, okay.
I mean, and I do see now, like just as a grace of the Lord, I see so much favor in my life, and oftentimes I need to be reminded that He is present always. But I've learned majorly one of the main themes with creativity is that like there's just a lot of work involved with being a creative, and I think in anything, but like this goes all the way back to like the garden where um when God created Adam, like he put him there to have dominion and to work the ground and to be a good steward of those things that he had already made. And I've just had such a diminished view of that, such a broken view of that, for the longest time. And to this day, I still think there's some parts of me that are healing that have never quite been able to fully reconcile what it means to work hard at something, and really still give glory to the Lord for all that He has made and all that He wants to do through you, and seeing His hand in all of it. And it's just like I'm just you know a vessel in that. I
Mm.
mean, just kind of
Mm.
the age old term that you hear thrown around a lot, but it's so
Yeah.
accurate in describing what it is, when you see goodness and when you see beauty in
Mm-hmm.
life and in the world and other people. It's really just because it's flowing through from above,
Mm.
um, into someone and then out of them. And for me, just to kind of sum up this chapter, I think I've totally rabbit trailed, but
No, no, no. I know where I'm going.
yeah, okay, great. um, but it's like a lot of that, a lot of the sweetness doesn't actually like make its way out into the lives of other people until like there's some pressure, and some like brokenness, um, and it's just sort of like, yeah, it's under pressure that's the sweetness kind of reveals itself and can kind of actually see the light of day and then bless other people.
Mm-hmm.
So I really went through some uh rough experiences where I sort of found myself at the end of my rope later in adulthood, and just having not really been walking closely with the Lord, where out of jealousy for me, he really got my attention, and just I found myself like in a very broken place where life got kind of, the rug got pulled out from under me, and then actually that led to like a birthing of just my heart being open to a lot of the work that, um I'm looking forward to doing, but it all started with his vision for my life and me being open to it, and me
Yeah.
being, me acknowledging him in all my ways. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, and so you that whole element of like the faith with the creativity, so that kind of is something you're saying came a little bit more recently compared to maybe
Yeah.
when you first grew up in the church and grew up with faith, but that kind of more authentic realization of God's role in your life
Mm-hmm.
is something that came a little later. So so you got into your creative stuff before that
Yeah,
element fully kind of came into
I think so.
view. Okay. So
Yeah. Hmm.
how did that go in terms of like how did you approach what you're doing now when you didn't have that as much? And then how did some of that stuff
Mm.
change once you kind of had more of those realizations you were just talking
Yeah.
about?
That's really good. I mean, for me, it's so interesting. I look back on it now. I mean, I guess hindsight is like, if not 2020, like darn better than whatever it is in the present moment. So, but looking back, it's like, um, I think there was moments of faith where I exercised real faith, and I
Mm,
wasn't even thinking about it in those terms. But the truth of the matter is like, whether you know it or not, like, there's opportunities to operate on biblical principle. And I don't
mhm,
even think you have to be a believer to do that. You might
mhm,
accidentally slide into that, or it just might be the Lord's hand guiding you. But I look back and it's like I threw myself into a industry that I didn't even know existed where I lived. And so I had sort of had a few contacts that were doing things in the film world.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
now I look back and I realize it's like I've had more than 10 years in a career that I, even if you had told me that was possible, I would have had a lot of doubts, because to me it only really existed if you went to like LA.
Mm,
And it's like there's cities all over the world and you could travel anywhere and be in this business. So it's really interesting. I just kind of took an interest, took what was in my hand, and just like kind of threw myself at it. And you knock on doors, like some will open. There's
mm,
opportunities everywhere. And I think, considering that I had moved out with really only being booked in advance for like a month, that was totally an act of faith. I mean, that was probably some of the greatest rent in terms of like highest rent that I've ever paid. It was just like upon moving out of my parents' house after being back from college, having a film degree, but that means nothing in this world. So it's like, yeah, it was totally an
really?
act of faith. I mean, um, and even if I wasn't walking as closely with the Lord and didn't have so much revelation around like really how he was looking to reconcile so many broken parts of my life, yet uh I was still operating off of, you know, biblical principle of how he made things, because the way that he made them.
Mm.
So there's a lot there that I've gleaned, I think, looking back. Like, wow.
So
Yeah.
what do you do? So when you say booked out or stuff like that, for people that wouldn't know, like what do
Mm.
you do?
Right.
with film, and
Yeah.
and so you started this after college. So you'd gotten a film degree.
Yeah.
Okay, I
Yeah.
don't even think I knew that.
Yeah. So it
You
like
had
literally it matters
so you got a
not
film
at
degree.
all.
So you wanted to get into film stuff. So you've always had a creative bent.
Yes. So yeah,
Is that
we'll
true?
go back a little bit more. I've always been an artist. Really, my first love. This is the way that I've always framed it.
Mm.
My first love was always music. My
Ooh,
parents are the ones that I have to thank for that. So they
nice.
put
Okay.
me in piano classes when I was 6 as soon as I could read. That was like the
Mm,
recommendation from the piano teacher that we had, contact with at the time. And so that was the gift that they gave me, of which I'm very thankful for. Um, and what I wanted to do was go study music, and they were very adamant about pick something else, like, not
really?
in support of that, which was really frustrating and difficult for me at the time because it was like, man, this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to like,
And they they
yeah,
they instilled that in you.
exactly. It
So it's
was
like what?
a little confusing for me, but I look back now
Mm,
actually, and I feel like perhaps, I've dodged a bullet there,
mm,
perhaps.
mm, mm,
Um, but yeah, it's still a huge part of my life, and
mm,
actually, that's something that I'm working with now a lot more than I have.
mm,
I've kind of been able to, by the grace of God, reconcile some of those kind of broken parts of like feeling frustrated around not really being able to like maybe step out and like jump at that as much as I wanted to then. But always been an artist. All that said, I got to the point where I was looking at choosing a degree, and so I kind of had some experience, um, some enjoyable experiences in high school doing like broadcasting and working with like Final Cut Pro editing programs, cameras.
nice. Okay.
So I jumped into sort of like at the time what I considered like, well, this is this is plan B. So this is
Mm,
like my next favorite thing. Like I'll do it if I have to. So then I picked a film degree, did that, and then finished school, and then basically didn't know that you could actually do that as a career, but had a Canon T3i and just was running around with the DSLR trying to get clients of my own,
mm,
seeing other people do work that I kind of looked up to. And then as I was knocking on doors, hoping for myself to get opportunities using the little bits and pieces of knowledge that I've gained, you know, um, really what took off for me was just like I started getting on set and
mm,
discovered a whole world of actual like uh, organized, team based um, mentality type filmmaking, which is exactly how any production company works.
right. Right.
Like you need an army of people. So I
Yeah.
started touching lights and stands. I was a production assistant for different companies, just sort of filling in and doing things on a small scale. And then my career now was born from those early on moments of just falling in love with like light in particular and just like
Mm, mm.
the incredible vastness of what light when it is controlled can actually convey is just like
Yeah.
it totally blew my mind. So I work as like as a grip or an electrician depending on the job, and sometimes as a department head, so a gaffer or a key grip. So adding light, shaping, modifying existing light, or manufactured light, and being a cog in the machine of the filmmaking world. Yeah.
Yeah. There's something about like, and I'm not the like I've been on sets multiple times. All done that production stuff. We've worked
Yes, we
on the
have worked
same
together.
sets for companies that have nothing like bigger, like a
Yeah.
bigger shoots for legit, companies and something. I'm sure there's
Yeah.
someone owns it like Coca-Cola or something like that, and it's some
Mm.
product. But we've been on those sets, and
Yeah.
those are interesting. But I think for me, um,
Always interesting.
that's when like certain things click. Like before you
Mhm.
get on a set, when you're thinking about working in that production industry, it's like you can only conceptualize it so much until you kind of see that.
Yes.
And so then
Yeah,
it's like,
totally
oh, there
true.
are multiple jobs, people filling roles, and it starts to make a
Yeah.
little more sense. But so you did
Yeah.
just because I want to share some of just the behind the
Slow
scenes of
trickle.
like,
Yeah.
there are if you are creative, like there are paths, like
Oh,
multiple
yeah.
paths you can take, even just in the film production,
Mhm.
even on a set. There's multiple, like for me, it was
So
like
many avenues.
getting into art department and all that was
Yeah.
really cool. But um and you learn a lot. You watch the other people doing their job,
Yes.
and then you learn it. And so for video, it's really helpful. But
Yeah.
so you did that. You found yourself in that career path, which was already
Yes.
unexpected in some ways, even though you
Yeah.
got a film degree and knew you wanted to do something creative. But then it kind of
Yep.
so you actually got there, and you're doing that for a bit, and then you don't have to get into your testimony fully right now,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
share as much as you want. But at some point, you kind of have this like reconnection with God in your life, and kind
Yeah.
of seeing He has a purpose and sees you, and He has a purpose for you, and
Yeah.
you can pursue hearing His voice in what you're
Yeah.
doing,
Right.
creatively and otherwise. So how did that change your dynamic
Mm.
with the production world and all that?
That's such an interesting question. Uh, I don't even know if I can. I mean, I'll try to take a stab at that. Um, I've. I mean, really, there's a pretty clear defining moment in my life. So I went through a breakup.
Mm,
And on the surface, it's like, yeah, those are bad. Like, we feel for you. It's never fun for anyone. But for me, it was just like I've never been more rock bottom. Just like totally, you know, just yeah, without a leg to stand on. It was just like the most heartbreaking thing that I've ever experienced. Profoundly so that it really started bringing to life certain things when I kind of started opening up scripture again, which was like kind of prior to this all, culminating. But when you read things like the Lord's close to the brokenhearted, it's like, oh man, that's not just like a saying. That is that's where he met me. Like that's where I could hear his voice the most. It's like it's when there was no possible thing in life that existed anymore for me to find any solace in. And it was just
mm,
like what I had was just like the invisible reality of like the Holy Spirit wrapping its arm around me and
mm,
just like the presence of Jesus, like
mm,
just in, you know, in the room that my father grew up in when I was staying back at my grandpa's house, like,
mm,
and just kind of didn't know where else to go. So it was
mm.
like that's really just kind of what where the Lord found me. Not that like he didn't know where I was, but he knew exactly where I was. Um and so I think for me, like how that I mean it's changed everything. It's like that honestly, it's like the answer is like it's changed everything
Not
as
just
far
the
as
yeah.
yeah, as far as the work is concerned. I've had a lot that God has touched on about even my relationship to work.
Mm,
I don't know if that I mean, I think I kind of mentioned in the beginning, but like very like a lot of different layers. Um, and I think I kind of honestly like have had to repent from even some sense of like laziness because it's good to work. Like it's good
mm,
to work hard. God made us to work. It's like it was in the design from the beginning. Um, I worked hard in the beginning, but you go through so many seasons with like a career that's 10 plus years long. It's hard not to get you know, disillusioned. It's hard not to get like, you know, frustrated or um, just tired and beat down, you know. And so one of the things I think he's kind of really breathed life into. I mean, there's so many things, but there's one thing it's in particular. It's just like, just um, I think just understanding that everything is like to do everything unto him. I
mm,
think in the past, um, I kind of wanted to hold as much of the creative reins of anything I touched as possible.
mm,
And that really kind of came from a lot of maybe childhood wounds and whatnot, where it's like, I want to express myself essentially is kind of the cry of my heart. Um, but like I've discovered that God knows me better than myself. And actually like in the same way that Jesus came to serve, like I have found a much happier and healthier relationship to my job when I show up with the same posture.
mm,
It's like I'm just here to serve. Like I am here. I don't get what I want all the time.
mm,
In fact, I hardly ever do. And it's like that was a mercy from the Lord to like teach me that. But a lot of the times when you feel like you hit that invisible glass ceiling, it could be very disorienting and maddening. And then you realize I'm not made to get everything that I want. I'm not the center of the universe. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So you touched on a few things there
Mm. Mm-hmm.
that are deep wells unto themselves, but one of the things
Yeah.
is like, how I think having a revelation of God will change your perspective on
Mm.
creativity, and it'll change your perspective on work. And
Yeah.
when you do creative work, it's
Mm.
already a little bit confusing because you there's a joy that comes, I think, in creative work that I think earlier on you're like, can I
Mm.
kind of maybe I could sidestep this whole work thing and
Yeah.
just do something creative so that
Yeah.
I still earn income, people still do, but I don't have to quite work as much. And I think I've had to learn a lot
Mm.
about that element too.
Yeah, that's
Um,
interesting.
but then also when you're creating um something I've seen, and maybe your relationship with
Mm.
work didn't change as much, but you
Mm-hmm.
can answer and I'll kind of share what's changed for me is as
Mm-hmm.
I've had revelation of God, my my relationship with wanting to express myself through creativity and art has
Yeah.
changed more in that it's about maybe me, or I have something that this is, I want people to see this in me so they know me, and it's a kind of thing. And rather it's changed to like
Yeah.
there's things that I want to express about the
Mm.
truth of who God is and who he's made me to be. So there's that me element.
That's
But
so
also
good.
it's like
Yeah.
I've felt more free to not have this burden of I gotta get it just right so everyone knows exactly who I am. Um Maybe speak to some of that
That's
if
really
that
good.
changed a little bit more for you
Man, I mean, I think it's changing even right now as you
in this
say that.
moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's the power of words. When I mean it's and we need like reminders all the time about like what's true, because like our
Mhm.
feelings don't always dictate um, you know, reality back to us in the way that it actually is. And so I think yeah, that's a profound discovery to come across as a creative because um the problem is that like we're inherently creative, right? So it's like we can't really do away with this, and that's why
Mhm.
it's like such a struggle. It's like how do I reconcile this with like something that's so much bigger than me, but where this feels so intertwined, like, you know, honestly, you know, what at the end of the day is probably a selfish pursuit because it's like I want to be seen, I want to be understood.
Mm.
um this will make me money, and money is what I need more money if I'm doing what I love and I'm making money at it, then I could be happy. So I really like I'm trying to marry these things, but it's actually this component right here, this creativity exists, and it comes from the Lord. I think when you give things back to him
Mm.
for his purposes, you find freedom in that because
Mm.
you're actually using the tool that's been given to you in the way that it was designed to be
Right.
used.
Right.
And so I think you just hit on something that's like such a fresh reminder for me because from day to day to day, it's like you labor at something and sometimes you can forget what you're doing it for. And so I
Mhm.
think having that spelled out again is like, yeah, I think even now I'm learning like the Lord's weaning me off of the natural proclivities that I've had my whole life of trying to find my identity in something that is also how he made me, but really it exists to the purpose to serve a God that's greater and has an infinite amount of goodness and beauty to really like uphold and like
Mm.
share with those who don't know him. Um that's just yeah, I don't know, the beauty of the gift of art.
Yeah, I, I
So
I think about how, and this is something like where it was, part of the goal of the podcast is having people on, hearing other stories, hearing other perspectives, and talking about this kind of thing because um being a creative, like you can be a creative and not a believer. You can be a believer and
mhm.
not a creative in terms of like that's your first kind of bent
Mhm.
of like I have to make stuff. I have to,
Yeah,
I have to find a field where there's an artistic expression of some kind of thing.
for sure.
Um, you can but so people in the world that are creatives, really all they have to really drive is that kind of personal expression.
Yes,
um at the end of the
that makes
day,
sense.
there's things, people come together as a team, to express one kind of thing,
Mhm.
when the money's there. Sometimes maybe there's a director, they have a vision for a movie, maybe there's a product,
Yeah.
the company's paying, we want you to make our product look this way. But at the end of the day, the
Yeah.
personal like tapping into the personal artistry of each person in a genuine way, I think would be more
Mm.
difficult in the world, because at the end of the day,
Mm.
their heart's going to be wanting to express something singular about themselves,
Yeah.
probably, their
Mhm.
own perspective. And so what I'm like trying to dig into is like, how as
Hmm.
believers that are creative, um, do we take advantage of this unity that we should be able to share in, of wanting to express
Yeah.
the beauty of God, and that we can
Right.
actually let that override our personal feeling of needing to express our own individuality, and yet in that we bring something unique and individual to
Mm.
the table that makes it a unique expression, so it's like
Yeah.
there's just more, I think, to do if you are a believer, because with others. And
Yeah.
when you start working
That's
with
good.
others, you need others to build things you can't build on your own anyway.
Mm.
So it's like so much of my heart for this whole media missions, creating unto the beauty of God, is like, how do we um that share this common heart purpose in loving Jesus? How do we, as
Mm.
believers and creatives, just kind of see some of the opportunity, that is really there, if
Yeah.
we if in terms of that unity. And I think part of the struggle is right now, a lot of the creative industries and the way people work, if you're creative and you want to make a living and you're a
Mhm.
believer, you don't your options are somewhat limited,
Mm. Yeah.
um in doing it in a way that's not just kind of another job that is to, like we've done, like we do, like
Yeah. Yeah.
make this ad for this Coke drink, or make this, um, film for this just story that's just someone thought of a
Yeah.
story, but
Right.
rather than it's like, or and I think that's where even in the church, it's like, be a graphic designer for that
Mm.
church for their sermon series,
Mhm.
and so it's a little bit difficult in, um, how do we as a church, like body of Christ, big church, start to make things that
Mm.
that that stand out in the world and impact
Yeah.
on a bigger scale, using some of that unique opportunity.
That's
And I think
interesting.
we have
Hmm.
starting to see stuff like that, like these TV shows like The Chosen,
Sure.
and there's this
Yeah.
new House of David one, and
Mhm.
and it's like you're starting to see that. Um, but man, and we've seen it in the past, for
Yeah.
better or worse, cathedrals and all these,
Oh, yeah.
like architecture was probably the biggest thing,
That
and
is
those
interesting.
have
Yeah.
actually had a legacy that's actually impacted the world in a big way,
Right.
and
Still
not just
standing
art,
a lot.
art, traditional art, fine art, but
Mhm.
what in this moment, what's some more things we can
Hmm.
do, um, when we tap into that, both those sides, as a believer and a creative, and some of the
Mm.
unique advantages. That's somewhat of a long-winded
Yeah. No, I get
way
you.
to
Yeah.
get to that point, but it just makes me think about it in terms of what we're talking about,
Mhm.
um, in in these dynamics of work,
Mm.
artistry, these come to Jesus moments when stuff, the dynamic shifts. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
makes me think about that.
Man, I mean, in my mind goes lots of place. I think where I struggle to answer that question is like with the practical, right?
Right. It's definitely a challenge on the practical side of some of these things, because, you know, I wouldn't say I wouldn't want to
Mhm.
want to give the impression where it's like, yeah, if you're creative and you just, you're just using that to make money, work for yourself, then, you're kind of missing
Mhm.
the boat, or you're missing the point, or whatever. Even having people on this podcast, like, I don't want to just have people that,
Mhm.
oh, you're creative and you work in ministry
That makes
using your
sense.
creativity.
Yeah.
It's like, you're creative, you're a believer, you may work in a creative field, you may not, you may uh,
Yeah.
work in a ministry, you may not, but
Yes.
those dynamics still all play,
Yes, they
and
still show
and
up.
you have a story, and kind of just hearing what people are doing,
Yeah.
just so that there can be at least conversation around, like, it doesn't have to look, it can look all kinds of different ways, and at the end of the
Mhm.
day, um, you're still pointing your creative bent towards finding an expression of something meaningful
Mhm.
uh, with who God is and showing who
Yeah.
God is. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's a conversation I will be having with people as they,
There's so
because
many
it's like I'm,
places I
yeah,
know I wanna
yeah,
go. Yeah.
it'll well, and it'll be hard to, it's already difficult to keep it, contained in some ways, um
Yeah.
but that's like
Yeah, I
going to be
feel
the
that.
purpose of this podcast
Dude,
is,
it's
you
awesome.
know
I love
what
it.
kind of picture can be painted over many different episodes with some recurring people or not, and just kind of
Yeah.
seeing what that kind of expresses itself to. So,
Dude, I think this is a perfect example of that too. Inviting people into a space where it gets touched on is actually is a fresh breath of air to any artist
mm,
who feels like they're struggling with their calling, whether they feel like it's their calling or not, because we're all inherently creative. But I know for me, it's like I've had a lot of that very highlighted for me, and so it's like I have a pretty strong idea, and I've done some work to really, you know, kind of understand the direction that I'm going in, and it's like some days it can feel like a lonely journey, but this in what you're doing here is like just totally aiming at helping integrate us with one another in a way
mm,
where it's like this actually is really exciting and
mm.
kind of spurs some life into that. So that's really cool.
Well,
Yeah.
thanks. Well,
Yeah, bro.
it's been a
Thank you.
good conversation, and uh we'll keep talking offline, I'm sure, about all kinds of stuff like we do.
Yeah.
But hopefully, we'll have people coming back, because there's just, yeah, there's more to say. And
There's
so,
too much to
yeah, so
touch
thank
on.
you
Dude, thanks.
for Sean for joining me, and thank you for watching episode 2 of the Banner Studios podcast. I hope to see you at the next one.
Cool.
Bye.